Acts chapter 9, and I'm going to be reading in Acts chapter 19 also if you want to go through there. But we've got just a few things. I try to be sensitive all week to just one thing. God just speak one thing to me. I'll get in there and dig a little bit and do the work and try to figure out what you're trying to say to me. But speak one thing. And when I get to that point, I'll let you know what I feel like God spoke to me this week. But anyway, going back and doing studying on it, here's what I found. In Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1, it says, "But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem." Y'all got different versions. I'm reading from ESV this morning. What are you reading from, Paul?
NIV.
All right, tell me.
It's the same.
It says the way.
Yeah.
All right, the way. Anybody else reading from? I think Tim's probably ESV this morning, right? NIV. I was thinking you got the same thing. Anybody else reading from New King James or King James this morning, following along? If you go look at them, they all have in some reference, they say the way, okay? The way. And that's what we're sort of going to look at this morning. Now look at chapter 19 of Acts. Verses 8 and 9 we're going to read, and it says, and this is the same guy. First he was Saul, and we find him in the beginning, he's mad about the way. He's really mad. You might not realize this, but this guy is mad about something called the way. But now we find him in verse 19, he's been transformed by the way, and here he is in verse 8, he says, or chapter 19, verse 8, he says, and he entered the synagogue and for 3 months spoke boldly, reasoning and persuading them about the kingdom of God. But when some became stubborn and continued in unbelief, speaking evil of the way before the congregation, he withdrew from them and took the disciples with him, reasoning daily in the hall of Tyrannus. Maybe it's Tyrannus, I don't know, but Tyrannus. Drop on down to the 23rd verse. It says, about that time there arose no little disturbance concerning the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades and said, men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that the gods made with hands are not gods. Now I'm going to go also to Acts chapter 28. I failed to tell you that, but over in Acts 28. Starting in verse 20, it says, for this reason, therefore, I have asked to see you and speak with you, since it is because of the hope of Israel that I am wearing this chain. And they said to him, we have received no letters from Judea about you, and none of the brothers coming here has reported or spoken evil about you. But we desire to hear from you what your views are. For with regard to this, now here's the word that the king is writing in. Not this isn't Paul speaking or any of the other apostles, but this is what somebody else is saying about the way. He says, with regard to this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. You turned there, Tim? No, didn't make it. 28:20, did you make it, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
What does it say in NIV as far as this sect? Does it say?
It says sect.
Sect. Okay, but I want to let you know something, that word sect, if you turn back in Greek, that word is something that we know of a lot more than the sect. You know, a lot of people, but it'd be section, you know. But anyway, in the Greek, it is particularly the word that is heresy. That's the word that he says, this heresy. Now, the thing that I'm just trying to bring to point this morning, and we know this, that Luke is the author of the book of Acts. So all this Luke is writing, and sometimes when he's saying, he's given a specific quotation from what somebody says, but at other times he's just writing along and saying what he needs to say about this. Y'all understand that? When he's saying the way, in a couple of instances, he's saying the way, and that's his words. This is what they're coming against. They're coming against the way. And at other times, they actually are using this in their conversation, and they're calling this thing that is going on, this movement, they're calling it the way. Now today, we don't necessarily call what we are as the way. We call ourselves the Christians, Christianity. So if somebody's coming against us, we'd say they're coming against Christians, but they're coming against Christianity. But sometimes it's good to roll back into their lifestyle and their pronunciations of things and understand how they felt about it. Because for us, here's what I'm just wanting to warn us against today. And again, I say, well, when you're warning 15 people, you might not be changing the world, but you possibly can. Here's what I want to warn us against today is that, as time goes on, we have things such called as being politically correct and things like that. And we have a sense, to not want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to offend anybody. And I'm all for not offending anybody. Have y'all ever noticed that about me? Polly knows this about me. I am the biggest scaredy cat when it comes to offending anybody. I mean, it seems like in my personal nature, I go every which way in the world to keep from making anybody mad. I don't like conflict. But here's the thing I want to say. I don't believe, in just absolutely to offend anybody just for the offense. But what I have gotten from these verses that I've read in the last few days and the thoughts that I've had is there is some things that is worth taking the chance of offending somebody in. And see, these apostles, they didn't say somebody got offended because we were acting a little bit different than they were, and somebody got offended because that they didn't agree with us. But what the apostles said was that they were doing something that was so important to them that they didn't say it was a way. They didn't say it was one of the ways, but they said the very movement that they were part of was the way. It was the most important thing in life to them was something called the way. It was so important, and here's some of the things that I say. I've been guilty of being invited to preach at places before and turning them down because I was like, well, I don't agree with everything about them. I'm just going to go offend them. And now I'm looking at this and saying, Steve, how wrong were you to not go and just preach something to them that was the way, the truth, the life, that's something that Jesus, that's what he said about himself. He said, I'm not just a way, but I'm the way. Peter went about to preach after that Jesus said that. Peter went and said, there is no other name given among men whereby we must be saved. He said, this is what we're doing this morning was created on. This is what that it came to life as, was not that we're just another way to God, but according to what we believe, according to what God has said, according to what Jesus said about himself, according to what all the apostles have said, this is the only way to God. That's what we're here to preach this morning. That's what we're here to say. And when we begin to study this grace, it also is just as important that we understand that any other way than grace is not the way. Amen. Any other way than total dependence upon the blood of Jesus is not the way. Right. If we add anything to the blood of Jesus and say, you get saved by what Jesus done on the cross, now if you'll keep yourself totally clean for the rest of your life, keep the 10 Commandments, keep all this, then you'll be saved. This is how important that this doctrine of grace is to us, that we need to understand that the Apostle Paul didn't just go to whoever would listen to him. But the Apostle Paul, who was at first so mad, so tore up about something called the way that he wanted to kill people that were doing this, was transformed in such a powerful live way to himself. It was so real to him and so important to him that now the same doctrine that he was killing people for, now he's standing boldly, not just out on the street. He's not just going around somewhere where all his buddies are, but now he's invading the space of the synagogue, going into the synagogue where that he's not accepted, not liked, not loved, totally going to stir things up. He's walking into the synagogue and saying, this is how important it is for you to know the way. Amen. I have to tell you that there's only one way, that it's Jesus. He's the one that has been prophesied from day one. He's the one that all the prophets talked about, that Moses talked about, that all of those before us were looking for is Jesus. And guys, I just can't keep, he says, I can't keep from coming in here and trying to persuade you that this is the way, right, that it's Jesus. And I'm just telling you all these things this morning because I don't want you to follow my lead and be one of these that's scared of hurting somebody's feelings. And at the same time, I know that out of love, we're not going to just hurt people's feelings just to be hurting their feelings. Will y'all agree with that we're not going to do that? Amen. That we're going to love, 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 love. We're going to care for people. We're going to nurture people. We're going to be their friends. We're going to try our best to be good representatives of Jesus, and at the same time, not at any point in time leave them with the untrue feeling that they can get to God any other way other than Jesus. So whatever that does for you, I hope it encourages you. I hope it strengthens you. I hope that it prepares you that you can say, no, I don't want to offend anybody just for the sake of offense. But if somebody doesn't get the message to them, then they have no access to God. No other way can anybody get to Jesus. Amen. I thought for a long time, before we even moved to this building, I kept looking at Best Way. And I thought, what a good name for a church, Best Way. Yes, amen. And then I said this, no, wait a minute. We'd have to go and take the best off, and we'd either have to put the or only in front of way. But it'd be great to keep that part of Best Way, you know. And I've thought for a long time, that's my ideal building, just across that wall right there. That's the ideal place. I'd love to meet there with everybody in Carthage and change that Best Way to the Way. You know, wouldn't that be great? Yes. The Way. But that's how important it is what we're believing today. Jesus is the only way to the Father. Amen. Jesus is the only way into salvation. And we can't get timid, and we can't get scared to where that we allow somebody to go into the depths of hell one day because we weren't bold enough to tell them that there's only one way to God. Now here's what I believe the Spirit spoke to me this week, and it's found in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12 says this: there is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death. And when you're reading this Proverbs 14, you come down through there with all these random proverbs, you know. It's not one that just carries on thought. It's just random proverbs. And I'm thinking about, you know, how that I believe by all means that Solomon is being led by God, by the Spirit as he's writing these things. And just, you know, these things would come to Solomon and he'd write them down, and not knowing necessarily the significance of them in most cases, I don't think. And this is one of those that I looked at that, and then 2 chapters later, in chapter 16, verse 25, it is an identical, it's probably got a copyright against it, but anyway, it says, same thing. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. This is what I believe this week that the Holy Spirit was speaking to me is, there's been a time for a long time that I've thought that this way that seemed right to a man was basically saying that I'll do things my way and don't want any intrusion from God, don't want anybody telling me what to do. That's what I always sort of interpreted as. But here's what I believe that God showed me this week. Because if you read that for what it said, there is a way that seems right to a man. It doesn't say there is a way that seems totally out of God's will, out of God's way. But he said, this is what I believe God taught me this week, the one thing I got taught this week. It's not a way that seems that somebody says, I'm doing what I want to. I'm following my own will. But here's what it says. It says there is a way that seems, here's the word that got me, right. There is a way that seems like the way not to do wrong, but to do God right, to go to God. There's a way that seems like the way to go to God, to do the right thing, to be a good person, to find favor, to do enough work. There is a way that seems right to man. That way is the way that's been used since the very beginning of mankind, and it's self-work, self-works, self-goodness, self-righteousness. That's the thing that seemed right to a man ever since the beginning of mankind. That's how that Satan deceived Adam and Eve in the garden, is that he tried to convince them. He said, if you eat off of this tree, you'll become as gods, knowing what's good and evil, what's right and wrong. And in a sense, well, you'll be able to produce your own righteousness. You'll be able to please God in a sense. You'll be able to produce what God's looking for. In other words, God will like you if you become like Him. God will like you if you'll get this way. And this way that seems right has been the way that man has been trying to catch God's attention ever since then. It went right on to last week we talked just a little bit about Cain. You remember the only verse that we used was over in 1 Peter, I think it was, talked about Cain. It says, not to be like Cain, who was of the devil, right? The evil one. And we talked about, we didn't believe that he was a seed of the evil one, but he was under the influence of the evil one. So just immediately after that Adam and Eve fall, we find Cain and Abel following along the same path, or at least one of them, Cain does. Abel comes by faith and presents his gift as a faith in the sufficiency of the goodness of God and of His favor and of what He was going to do for Abel. And Cain comes with a bowl of fruit or a bowl of beans or something. And here's how I got thinking about this morning. And we've only got 3 youth here. So I thought about all 3 of these youth. I thought about Brittany. That what she might bring to mom and dad. And this is how ludicrous this thought is, that we can give something to God to earn His love. We would have Brittany that would come and working at McDonald's now, she might bring in a Big Mac. Might even bring the whole meal, Big Mac meal, fries, apple pie, everything, you know. I've earned this. Look, Mom and Dad, look what I've done. I went and got my own job now. And I'm bringing you food. I'm bringing you something now. And if her heart was to be so twisted that she believed that she could earn your love and favor that way, that's just as twisted as it is for us to think that we've got to give God something to earn His love. Amen. Same way, I'd take Elizabeth, and I found out, Elizabeth, she's doing more house cleaning now, even though she's getting this allowance for it. But one day Elizabeth comes in and she just cleans the house spotless. I mean, it's just, they've been out somewhere and the house just gets clean spotless. And she goes above and beyond her duties of this. Well, you were supposed to take out, this is the order they give when you left. You take out the trash and make up your bed. And they come back and all the beds are made up and all the floors are mopped and everything. She's took the curtains down and washed them and put them back up. I mean, it is just spotless. And Elizabeth has this big, glorious smile on her face, and she says, when Mom and Dad gets here, I'm finally going to earn their love. They're finally going to love me. I have finally done something worthy of them loving. And then we got little Will. Little Will's got a long ways to go. But so we're going to make it on easy on Little Will, and Little Will finally does that first potty on the potty. That could get, we could go nasty on this, but I've heard of them bringing it to mom and dad, and things like that. But Little Will says, I'm feeling so unloved, so I'm going to get mom and dad. They're going to, when they come in, they're going to be so happy. Mom, Dad, come look in the toilet. Look what I've done. Now I know that you'll love me. I know that you can love me now. Here's mom and dad on all this. They're saying, first off, Alicia's saying, 9 months carrying you in my belly. And I don't know how y'all's went. I'll go back to Lindsay for a minute. 24 hours of hard labor. Then the C-section comes in. We've put every meal on your table. We've put every stitch of clothing on your back. We've sent you to school, bought the books, come and picked you up, took you, done all the, all these things we showed. Not because we didn't want to, but because of our undeserved, unmerited favor of love that we have toward you, even before you was born. And that's God's way of looking at us. God's way of looking at us is totally, I desire to be good, to love, to give, to cherish, to build you up, to give you all good things. And you come to me with a bowl of beans, trying to earn what I've given you from the very beginning, not recognizing my unfailing, undying, unending love that I have for you. Now you're trying to earn it. And in Cain's case, with a bowl of beans. You see, because that's the way that seems right to a man. But the end of that way is death. See, the final thing is that God just can't allow us to believe that we've earned such great love that He has for us. The one thing God will not do is share His glory of what great love He's had for us. So this is how important it is that we know that this grace that we believe and live in is not just a way, not just some way, but it is the way to God. Believing in His unmerited favor. And see, in this case, it's so far away from the example that I gave about your family.
That's right.
Even further than that, God was willing to come and take our sin upon Himself in the form of Jesus and suffer and die in our place. And for anybody to turn their back upon such a great offer, a great extent, a great act of love, is death, is loss. So we've got to continue to be bold and strong in the fact that this gospel is the way to God. It is the way unto salvation. It is the only way that God will accept. We will call this part 1. And Brother Tim will be preaching next week. But there's other things that I want to encourage you in about this thing called the way. But it's time to close today.